Well, hello and welcome to I Love Gay today. And we're in Los Angeles today, and we are here with Kevin Yee. How are you, Kevin?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I loved reading this interview that Wesley had done over from Unleashed when he was in Austin, Texas with you for South by Southwest.
Yes, back in the day, 2 months ago, way back in the day.
I
But
know.
yes, we were at South by Southwest. I had a project there, an episodic pilot called A Guide to Not Dying Completely Alone. And I've been making films for a long time, but that was my first South by Southwest experience, and it
Wow.
was crazy. South by Southwest is chaos
I
in a good
bet.
way, but
I've never been yet, so I could just imagine, but it does seem like an experience unto itself.
oh yeah. Parties every night. You don't know what to do. There's so much happening. So you just walk out of your hotel and you're like, should I go right today or left? Or I'll go left. And then you just discover whatever's happening. So, but it was a great experience. And like as a filmmaker, South by Southwest is one of the top places to go. So it
Yeah.
felt good to be there.
Excellent. Well, you've got quite a background. I mean, I would just, it's fun to summarize a Canadian who moved to New York for Broadway, and then and now is living in Hollywood and living the dream. So
Yes. I've had a very chaotic career and life, and I've done so many things that sometimes I forget. That like when you just said, "Oh, Broadway," I was like, "Oh yeah, Broadway. I did that
yeah,
for 10 years."
yeah,
It's just very my thing is that I've distilled it down to like I just like storytelling and I like connecting with audiences. But that throughout my life it meant many things where I was like I started as a dancer and then I was a recording artist for a little bit here in Los Angeles. Then I went back to Canada, I did theater, did Broadway, and now I'm in Los Angeles, both acting and television, but now kind of more writing
yeah.
when we're not on strike, depending when you're watching
Exactly.
this. But like we are
Exactly.
currently on strike. Hopefully, by the time you're watching this, we won't be on strike, and I'll be writing TV again.
Yes, I know. Especially I have a Broadway husband, and so the whole thing
Mm.
with the Tonys and everything with that too. So, that's been impacted. MTV Awards shows recently was impacted. So it's a big deal.
It sounds like they worked out the Tonys, though, right?
They did. I mean,
Yeah,
but certain things are still not going to happen. But yeah, I think that they worked their way through some of that.
yeah. I mean, the point of the strike is to be disruptive,
Yeah. Oh, I know.
unfortunately.
But going back to it,
But
it's fascinating because you've got this movie that had come out and it premiered, but it's very fascinating. And it's written from as you've described, a queer Asian's perspective. And so, but yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
yeah, I mean, I've been writing for television. I've been in Hollywood and I've been a performer since I was a child. And one thing I don't see very often is like queer Asian stories
Right.
and never in the center of a show. I don't think there has been one on television. There's been ensemble pieces, there's been side characters, but there's not been one that's centered in queer Asianness. And so as a queer Asian performer, I noticed that. And like I auditioned for a lot of things that are just like, what who wrote this? Like why do they think this is accurate, right? So it's really been important for me to find authenticity in my storytelling, especially in my TV writing right
Yeah.
now. And so I wrote this story, which is really based and inspired on my own life, where I was I would say in my 20s, I was very, very confident. And then in my 30s, something happened where like I realized I didn't know what I wanted in life.
Yeah.
And so I turned to all of these self-help books and they're ridiculous. I mean, some of them are just like believe in your dreams and but they're also like the toxic positivity culture like makes you feel guilty. So I'd be reading these books and they'd be like, well, if you're not a millionaire by the end of the week, that's your fault. That's your problem, right? And so I took a lot of that in when I was reading it, but there was something in the moment where I was like, but this doesn't feel right because these books come at the idea that we are all equal. And we are not equal in society in America. We are not. As queer people, we're treated like shit. As like Asian people, we do not have the same 24 hours in a day.
Yeah.
And so these books to me were like ridiculous. So I was like, well, what would it be like to write a book from a bitchy queer Asian perspective, a self help book that's more realistic? And
Yeah.
that's kind of where the impetus of this comes from. So I describe it as a bitchy eat, pray, love for 2023.
Yeah.
And I originally wrote it like in my 30s, but I turned 40 this year. So I am now in my 40s. And I also find like aging, how do I say this? Like aging queerness is fascinating to me
Yeah.
because I'm noticing in my own self, and one of the themes of the project too is like a lot of like resentment and bitterness and anger from what I've experienced. But then, like, oh, the world has opened up and there's more acceptance, which is obviously not true as we're seeing, this
Yeah.
huge backlash. But, there's all this acceptance. But then I'm like, but I've still felt I was still called things for the first 35 years of my life. I was still treated badly. And so, how do you balance the two and say, like, I'm going to live my best life while having all of this like trauma?
Yeah.
And it's not about queer trauma. It's about how to like, how to, how to not die alone, a guide to not dying alone. That's what
Well,
it's
I
about.
loved some of what I was reading when it was that, and you put it isn't about dying, it's about how to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like everyone should have hope. Like, we can all have hope. But like I was saying, when I was reading these self help books, it made me feel more hopeless because I'm like, I tried. I positive thought for like 1 week. I wrote in my diary 10
Yeah.
pages every morning, and
Yeah.
it didn't make me a millionaire by the end of the week. And so then I would feel like terrible. But then I was like, I think we have to think about like not to say that like these things are not fixable or not like you can't get over these things, but it's like I think you have to accept things in your life and like and your past too,
Yeah.
and just be kind to yourself. Anyways, I'm not a self-help guru at all. I'm a television writer, but that's that's where I'm going. That's the angle of the project.
And
So
a comedian too. And I'm not just saying that from here.
yes,
This is and you've done stand up, even you've had a comedy special on Peacock, but you've also performed at
yes.
Pride as well, right?
Yeah, I did a whole like there was a transition out of theater into TV writing where I was like, I think maybe I'm going to try stand up. Like I said, I try a lot of things. My life
Yeah.
and career has been filled with many things, and stand up was one of those things where I was trying to find my authentic voice because as an actor and performer, especially as a child, I was very much a yes person. I was like, yes, whatever. Yes, thank you. Thank you for my job. And I would be doing these roles that like just weren't me and I'd never felt authentic. And so when I realized that and I got out of theater, I was like, maybe the best way to find my authentic voice is through stand up because you literally stand up on stage and
Yeah.
you talk into a microphone about your life. And so through that, like obviously like the queer community is very important to me, and like I was like I think maybe doing pride performances is important. So that is something that I did for a while, but I will say the pandemic killed my stand-up career. Not so much the stand-up career, but my desire to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I haven't done stand-up since 2020, and I remember my last show too. It was very mediocre. It was
Okay.
not a good way to go out. But Pride's, yeah, I think I did like Boston, San Diego. Like I really enjoyed those crowds
Yeah, yeah, that's. Oh,
back in the day.
I was gonna ask, do we get to look forward to seeing you this Pride season? But I guess that's not going to happen this year.
No, I've literally not written stand-up since 2020. So
Yeah,
it's more just like television is kind of my center right now.
yeah. Well, I look forward to being able to catch your film. I do go to some of the various film festivals here, and I noticed you were already, I think, in New York at the New Fest one as well, right?
That was like I've had a couple films,
Oh,
but
okay.
yes, one
Yeah.
one of them has been at New Fest. I don't know about this year if this project will be there, but it is I think submitted.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, like Outfest, we did Fusion this year, and Outfest is kind of my home base.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think all three films have played that I've done have played there. So, um, I'm not sure about the summer program, but we were there at Fusion earlier this year.
Yeah. Well, I look
So,
forward to being able to catch that. So, but mostly I was just really appreciative and happy you were able to take a few moments of your time and share kind of your story with your audience here.
of course. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And look forward to catching you in the real world here one of these days soon.
Yeah, it's one of these days. Fingers crossed.
Thanks again.
Thank
Take
you so
care.
much.